it's incredible, right? Everyone knows, everyone in the company, like salespeople, everyone, they just know, hey, in a few weeks, it will be end of cycle. We will get new stuff and we can
Yeah.
tell our clients and prospects about it. And with this confidence in being mostly green or all green, you get trust from other stakeholders, and it's just like things just start working. And for the teams themselves, from the people being participating on the delivery, having full focus is really a superpower. That is something that is really hard to get back from, and I wouldn't. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. And I like to maybe sum things up. This raises the bar for me for any future role or company. I mean, this, like, leaving this behind me and getting back to Kanban or Scrum or whatever, that would be super hard. I don't know if I would do that.
Yeah. Welcome to Shapers and Builders, the show about better ways to deliver great software products. Today I'm speaking with David Šabata, who is CTO at ROI Hunter. Our conversation today is part of a series about companies that use ShapeUp, a delivery framework originally created at Basecamp. If you've never heard of ShapeUp, check the show notes for a link to the video Shaping in a Nutshell by Ryan Singer, former head of strategy at Basecamp and author of the book ShapeUp, Stop Running in Circles and Ship Work That Matters. In our conversation, we talk about David's growth from individual contributor to engineering leader and his North Star principle of building a setup that he'd want to step back into as an individual contributor at any moment. David shares how he carefully managed his team's transition to ShapeUp by piloting it with a small team and generating early wins. How being strict on each project's allotted time has gotten the team to become true experts in fixed time variable scope, and the huge leverage he gets from enabling project teams to focus completely on their work. Enjoy! Hey David, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Hello, happy to be here.
Before we get into your experience with ShapeUp, I want to just quickly run through your background, understand a bit where you're coming from, what your current role is. So if you don't mind, can you just walk us kind of through the formative steps of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a builder at heart. I have built websites, information systems, mobile apps, even a 3D rendering engine. And in my early days, I worked at the software for software agencies, but then I got the opportunity to be at the beginning of a new company that will build a new product. And that's how I got where I am to ROI Hunter. I was one of the first two engineers, and as the company grew, I became a team leader, then the head of engineering, and now I'm serving as the CTO. I still write code, but I'm also responsible for building a good engineering culture. And I would say my personal North Star is to make the culture so good that if I were to become an individual contributor tomorrow, I would happily accept that job. And I think that ties like greatly to ShapeUp, right? The topics of
Yeah,
the day.
I love it. That's a really cool framing for yourself. Kind of create an environment you step into as an individual contributor. Awesome. And what time frame are we talking here? The steps you went through.
The company will be, I think, 9 years old this year. Uh, it would be like 2 years at each stage for me, maybe, roughly speaking.
Cool. Do you do you still remember what it was like to be an individual contributor, or is that kind of now long gone and just in your memory in a way?
No. As I said, I still like the job. I would say I went to the leadership out of necessity in a way. There was no one acting as like a technical leader. The company was small. There was no one to do it. Most people were on the business side of things.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to leave it in this like freestyle mode, so I had some opinions, so I shared it, and one thing led to another. But I still do write some code. Uh, of course, not as much as in the early days.
And what company size are we talking about then? You briefly mentioned in the beginning it was kind of leaning heavy on the business side. So I'd love to just understand ROI Hunter in numbers. How
Mm.
much engineers? How much in total? What are the focus areas inside the team?
Yeah. So the whole company is around 80 people, I would say. We have several branches. The headquarters is here in the Czech Republic, but we are also in London, Dubai, and Sao Paulo. And out of those 80 people, roughly 30 are product and engineering roles. So that's
Okay.
like we are. I would say we are as that's the thing, like compared to software agencies, right? We're building our own product, and the company, I would dare to say, is like product driven. So it's us coming up with what needs to get built. It's us doing the discovery and also and all those things. So that's I don't know actually if it's too much or too few, but
Yeah.
it's those 30 people, like a third of the company. I think it's good, and we are most of us are located here in the Czech Republic.
And to go a bit full circle here, do you want to just give a few words on what you do at RI Hunter and what's your business, your products, and your customers?
Yeah, sure.
And if I can throw in one more thing into the mix is how you are funded.
Mm, yeah. So we build B2B software as a service. That's our product, and what we do in a non business way, or like this isn't going to be a business pitch, but like my translation, we help online retail businesses improve their profitability, and we use data for that, right? We connect all the sources, uh, we provide some insights, and then we let them also act on those insights. It's not just reporting, but it's like going uh, all the way to making actions and then getting some data back from that. I don't think I need to go into details. This isn't the thing, but it's I would say B2B SaaS. That those are the parameters.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess that's enough context on a high level. What I like to then understand is how that context shapes how you've designed the way you work, maybe down the road. That's sometimes I was speaking last week with somebody where they also were in the B2B space, but had partners that they were selling a white label solution to, and then they had all these kind of custom requests, and so they had a dedicated team to handle that part of requests, so that doesn't interfere with like the main product work, and that's a bit the context I like to get.
Yeah. Well, in this on that topic, I think we are actually in maybe kind of special position where we're trying to establish a new category of products. Like, hey, let's everyone leverage your data this way, and
Yeah,
that means we get to do a lot of education towards our clients. Right? They don't know what they don't know yet, and that makes us deciding what the roadmap looks like. And of course, there are some requests from the clients as well if they are advanced. But it's most of the work is on us on most of the decisions. So maybe that's also an interesting parameter.
yeah, it is for sure. And in terms of funding, I don't. Did you mention
Oh
that,
yes,
or
no. We are VC funded.
is that something you feel in your day to day in terms of growth pressures?
Uh, not that much. I wouldn't say so. We were kind of under pressure several years ago. We had this we had this stage where it seemed that like we had a stable product that will do fine, but it turned out it wasn't sustainable. Right? We were to put it shortly, we were competing with Google and Meta, and that is not a great position to be in. So we had to slightly pivot the business towards the data as we are in now. And I assume our investors had a say in that, but
Yeah.
it's not like I would have a weekly session with them being grilled or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that gives exactly the context I was looking for, because sometimes when you have VC-backed companies that are just in some sort of either critical situation or hyper growth that's happening, you can feel very viscerally that you are a VC-backed company, right? Versus in self-funded or bootstrap companies, it's kind of more or less the same at all times in terms of growth pressures.
Yeah, I think like post pivot, we're still in the startup mode in a sense that we haven't really nailed the product market fit. We have like good indicators that we're getting there, but we're not at the phase that like, hey, this is it. Let's scale. Let's pour the
Yeah.
money in. So yeah.
Cool. And we talked before, and you mentioned also we briefly talked about this pivot that you went through, and how ShapeUp connected to that, right? So I'd love to maybe take that as something for you to run with, and tell us a bit about how did you get into ShapeUp, how did you discover it, and what were your early thoughts around the framework as such?
This is actually kind of funny because the first time I found it was probably 2019 as it was released. I skimmed through it and I just put it away, right? I
Mm-hmm.
had to rediscover it like 2 years later when a colleague of mine brought it on our book club, like just a meeting where we pick a book, read a few chapters, and then discuss it. And then it got me, and I was instantly fascinated by it.
Interesting. That is kind of funny that your first read doesn't seem to have been this wow moment.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts as to why that might have been?
I didn't do like a proper investigation, but I think I wasn't like, my mindset was more on the builder side of things. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that invested in the engineering culture, processes, and so on. I wasn't in the role to fully control those. So it was like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is interesting. Basecamp was already known for doing things differently, but that was it, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. And so you mentioned that it was brought up in this book club round, and what made it so that at that time it did connect with you?
I think it just like hit all the right notes. I was reading it and I was like keep nodding my head and saying yes, yes, like this makes absolute sense. And it's you know it yourself. It can be provocative sometimes. It just tears down some stereotypes or challenges them. So that was it. Like I like challenging, so that was also an
Mm-hmm.
ingredient. But all those topics like estimates, like we're not a factory, we're inventing new things, we're being creative, and it's super hard to estimate something that you don't know what's going to be. So things like that, right? Fixed time, variable scope. We were like stuck for a long time in this vicious loop of slow releases that made the product managers add more features to each of those releases, and that led even to even slower releases. So that was one symptom that I saw, and maybe some other thing was the pitch. There was the exact level of detail we were looking for, without knowing this is it, right? It connects the stakeholders and keeps enough space for the teams to do what they're best at. Things like that. You just go through it, and it was like, yes, this is. I was instantly tempted to try it out
Mm-hmm.
because I just it was it almost seemed too good to be true, so I had to test it myself.
Cool. That definitely resonates. I think a lot of people share this this experience of yes, this is yes, all of it. And So you mentioned how, I mean, it fit with some problems you were observing, like, preventing scope creep, these really slow releases. Was there also some upside that was necessarily fixing a problem that you were seeing?
I think it helped us frame the role of product designers. We didn't have this role before, and it came around the same time we introduced ShapeUp, or maybe a few months before. But we were still finding the fit, at least from my point of view. And this was actually a great clue on how to do it. So we split it in a way that the product managers are heavily focused on the shaping, while product designers are actually part of the delivery team working in the cycles. And this was actually a big help. That I don't know. I don't think we had a recipe for that before, and ShapeUp was really handy in that.
I think that's really interesting that you say that, and that ShapeUp unlocked for you a bit the role of product designer, because it clashes with a lot of other stories that I've heard around adoption of ShapeUp, where let's say a classical product designer role would understand themselves being heavily leaning towards the UX research side as well of things, kind of working a bit upstream, um, being involved with user understanding, user testing, and then rather handing stuff to the delivery side. So I'd love to just understand the profile of people that you have in the product design roles and why you feel it's a good fit on the delivery side, actually.
Yeah, just to be clear, they don't work exclusively on the delivery side.
Mhm.
They can also be doing what we call like a discovery cycle, or maybe doing some research. We time box those things to to be to have the same rhythm. But if they are part of the delivery team, it really helps to keep the flexibility, because the in the pitch there's this just like rough sketch or maybe a wireframe or something, and the team without the designer wouldn't have enough skills, I would say, like expertise, not really skills, like expertise,
Yeah.
to do the fine tuning, do the high fidelity. And even like in cases where mid-cycle you find out that you need to change something, right? So then you have no designer, and who gets to do those calls. So that's the role of the designer. Typically uh, they are really important at the beginning of the cycle, where the design comes
Mhm.
together, but then they shift more towards usability testing and those things, like gathering feedback. If possible, we like to do it in cycle. It can be challenging sometimes, but if we are able to do the testing and then apply those learnings, then it's really an incredible result.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That sounds really intriguing. How familiar would you say are the designers that you have with the medium of code, of front end development, of what's possible?
Well, if you mean compared to the Basecamp level, then not as much.
Mhm.
They are really,
No, but
really
that's
designers.
that's yeah. The Basecamp level is, I would say, front end engineer equals designer in a
Yeah,
way,
really
right? A
much.
designer plus all of these other visual design skills.
So I would say the core of those skills is like really building user-friendly things, the UX, UI, keeping the design language, aligning it even across teams, and then the testing, usability
Yeah.
testing, and researching for further work. And I have to say I'm not expert for design roles, so I'm just like, this is my
Yeah. Yeah.
impression.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Um, and but in terms of staffing, then we haven't gotten to this yet. I mean, you mentioned you have about a size of 30 people on the engineering org side. Um, Maybe this is a good time to talk a bit about how is the org behind that set up? Do you have squads? Do you have a pool of people that you put on projects?
Mm. We have always worked in teams, dedicate like a cross-functional teams dedicated to some part of the product, some a set of scopes to say. Um, as we were rolling out Shape Up for the first time, it was a good opportunity. It was that's how it connects to the pivot, right? Um, we knew the scopes are going to change somehow, but we didn't know
Yeah.
exactly how. So what Shaped Up allow us to do was to assemble the people for the exact bet and picking them out of their home teams until then.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing this for several cycles, we were able to find what are the new scopes. And some of them stayed the same. Some of them were transferred to other teams. There were some new scopes, maybe some were removed. So we still do have 4 teams, 4 cross-functional teams. Those teams have also stable product designers assigned to them. Uh, Besides that, there's this like engineers, there's team leader, QA. I think that's it. Yeah, front and back end. So this is something that we eventually ended with. It was like I had this setup in mind since the beginning. I do believe that we are not the company that would benefit from having a pool of people
Mm-hmm.
or several pools defined by the roles. Our product is really wide in terms of like domains you would need to know, and splitting it into several parts and assigning people to be experts in those parts is like more practical. This is something that we knew for a long time. So I wanted to stick to it, and ShapeUp was a great tool to temporarily shuffle those people across the team and those scopes.
Yeah, I'd love to understand a bit more on this, how the first few cycles went and how that fit into what you were doing. You just mentioned that it kind of timing wise it aligned with the pivot, and that you for the first few cycles pulled people and kind of
Mhm.
put together an all-star team of sorts. Um, yeah, talk me through the evolution of the rollout out of ShapeUp and maybe the learnings you had, the struggles you had at the beginning, and how you resolved them. I'd love to spend a bit of time on that.
Yeah. So probably since the beginning, I knew if this was going to work, I would need to roll it out to all the teams eventually. But
Yeah.
at the beginning, we carefully selected like one bet, and we tried to stick to all the best practices we knew, right? And then we assembled the team. It was 4 people, including myself. We made it a requirement for everyone to read the ebook to align on the dictionary and the processes. And probably the most critical part was to ensure that everyone has the full focus. This wasn't a regular thing before that, before Shape Up. So it took some calendar cleaning in order to get there. But after the cycle ended, it was it was like certain that this is the superpower that we weren't aware of. And
Hmm.
to compare it with the business as usual, that was for the remaining people. The teams were typically using either Kanban or Scrum, so that was it, right? And in that mode, you really split the work into small tasks, and you keep switching between them, or like maybe you like completing them, sure, but it's not. It's completely different than focusing 6 weeks on a single thing and thinking about it on a higher level. So that was amazing. Everyone was like, "Yeah, this is great. This is great." And that was actually I was able to tick off the first item on my master plan, because other people and other teams were curious about it. Like, "Hey, did you seem to be super happy. How is it working?
Why are you smiling so much?
Yeah, exactly. So that was it. Yeah, that was
Cool.
first cycle.
You mentioned that you carefully selected a bet and you gathered this team of 4 people. What were your selection criteria, both for the bet and for the people?
It was for the people. It was people who got enthusiastic about Shape Up, reading the book, and it's quite some time ago, but probably were also available at the time. I cannot really say
Yeah.
for sure. And for the bet, it was something that we knew. We didn't do some like proper shaping back then, but it was something we knew we want to do. So like we instantly bet on it, and had very little dependencies. So we knew the
Hmm.
team would be able to deliver it, and minimizing the risk. That was the key.
Yeah. So basically setting yourself up for first success, right?
Exactly,
Something that you
exactly.
could actually do in 6 weeks. Yeah, I was asking specifically also on the people side because some teams that I've spoken with, they discovered that ShapeUp was a good fit for parts of the team, but not for others in terms of that it does introduce a bit of pressure of making decisions that maybe previously you weren't forced to make or enabled to make. You can play it both ways.
Yeah, I can confirm that. um, Fortunately, we have some really great people, and for many of them, this was this was like unlocking their powers. They were always curious and provided like inputs for the product roles. Like, hey, we can do this thing very easily. It might sound hard from the product perspective, but I, as a software engineer, can tell you this is actually really easy. Things like that, right? Or
Yeah.
can we maybe improve this message to the users? I don't think it's very readable. Things like that. So previously, before ShapeUp, there, and I can justify that like from my own experience, it wasn't clear when and where you should provide those like ideas,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
not to interfere with someone's job. Like I don't want to come to a product manager and telling them how to do things, like how to do their job, right? But having this structure of a written pitch, which everyone can comment on. We use Google Docs for that, so there's
Hmm.
a ton of comments, and then having it on the right level that it still keeps enough space for small decisions being made for the team by the team. This was something that unlocked those people who were maybe staying back a bit, not to jump into someone else's role or job, and that's where those people shined. Uh,
Yeah.
it obviously didn't. Not everyone was like that, and some people are more focused on other things. So someone is maybe strong on the UI, on this like visual elements. Someone is a master of CSS, things like that. But overall, it's a good mix, I would say, and it definitely uh, it gives you, like, from a leader perspective, it gives you a new area where the people can grow, right? So
Yeah.
hey, my friend, you have some great ideas. Why don't you share it with the team? Why don't you propose some changes? Things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I love the how you connected it to there not being a good time to give this sort of input before. I can totally understand how that would be the case. So let's circle back a bit. You have the first cycle under your belt, and it was a success. And people are kind of asking, "Hey, what's what was step 2 on your master plan that you mentioned, and how did you go from there?"
Mm, well, we will gradually converting people to be in this shape up mode, and it did create some tension because not everyone you are like splitting the modes, and not everyone is working in the same one. And people who didn't try it yet, they don't even know fully what is it about, and how, like, what are the details, what to expect. So this was kind of tricky, but as I said, we knew, and as leadership, we were committed to go all the way through and eventually uh, roll this out to everyone. So after maybe 3 more cycles, we were able to have everyone on board. Everyone had gone through a cycle, and our capacity by the end of the first year was 4 big bets, or comparable amount of small ones, so up to 8 small bets.
Hmm.
That was also
So,
our like success criteria for us as leaders. This is something we set to achieve.
hey, I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening and to let you know about the Shapers and Builders job board. On shapers.builders, yes, that's the domain, you'll find jobs in software development, design, product management, and other roles at companies that work with ShapeUp. Many of these roles are remote, and teams who use ShapeUp generally run at a more sustainable, healthy, and meaningful pace than the hamster wheel of 2-week sprints. So if you're looking for a job in tech or trying to find great people, head over to the Shapers and Builders job board at shapers.builders. Now let's turn back to the conversation. You mentioned how there was a bit of a struggle, and I'd love to double click on that, because that I think that's what other teams will value hearing, that it wasn't all smooth sailing, and I'd love to understand a bit what the concrete points of friction were and how you navigated them.
I would say, ironically, me as the Shape Up ambassador, I had to push back several times, because after the first bet being such a big success, everyone like, especially from the product roles, everyone wanted to
Mm-hmm.
use it. Like, hey, I will write a page, get me a team, let's do this. But they didn't necessarily saw the effort we put before that, right? Like, we have read the book, or we had read the book. We did all the scope hammering, or the de-risking, everything. And one of the struggles that I had with product roles was to say, like, this isn't about writing things down. It's that there's a reason why there are those
Mm-hmm.
sections, like rabbit holes, no-goes. And it is actually not a small job to come up with a good and valuable pitch, right? And then also you need counterpart, you need some tech roles that will tell you if this is even possible, and so on. And not all the delivery roles are ready for it. Like, they haven't read the book, they hadn't gone through all the steps we did. So in a way, me being the biggest fan, I had to hold some people back. So that was kind of funny.
Was the book the main training material that you had, or did you start to develop stuff in-house, like case study and guidelines or policies?
I don't think we had any in-house. We only have a template in the Google Docs, as I mentioned. And the book says it all. It was more about getting a grasp of it and making it a regular thing. So with every cycle, everyone who was involved got better. They got better at shaping. They got better at maybe slicing, and all those steps. So it was probably just a matter of time to get there, and to get the practice. What helped, and what I started from the first cycle, was a wiki page where I track the cycles. What are the bets on
Mm-hmm.
them? How did they ended up? So if it's a red or green, delivered or not, and also some learnings. So in the beginning, it was a mix of red and green. There were every cycle there were some learnings, and as we were always able to get back to those, and everything was on this one page, it was it was a good help. I think it was like, hey, we tried this before, it didn't work. We need to do
Yeah.
it differently.
Yeah. Cool. So you were accepting some reds as well?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like, what can you do, right? So I intentionally made it pretty strict. So as the cycle ends, basically the team stops to exist, right? There's cool down. They may have other plans. I don't know, take a vacation or anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, it's the last day of the cycle. Tomorrow, there's no tomorrow. It
Mm-hmm.
just needs to be done, right? So the reds, sometimes it just didn't work, but some reds were like, hey, we have all things ready, we will just like do the review and testing next week. And I was like, no, that's still a red, sorry. And over time, people calibrated and accepted this being the bar, and it works fine. And actually, as we got mostly green, or like, I think we've been all green for past a year or so. We allowed
Wow.
ourselves to decouple it and say, okay, it needs to be merged, it needs to be tested and everything, but we don't need to release it the last day, which is typically Friday.
Yeah.
We don't need to release it right away. So let's hit the merge button on Monday, or something like that. But it still assumes that the team is no longer needed, right? That's the criteria.
Wow. That sounds really gutsy though, to say no, you know, there's no tomorrow. Did you, I have to drill down on this, but did you really trash complete projects?
No. We didn't throw the work away, unless it proved to be just wrong way. In that case,
Yeah.
it happened maybe once or twice. No biggie. But we let the people finish it during the cooldown if they wanted to, but we would still track it as red, and we would say, hey, it wasn't the success we were aiming for. So it was more,
Yeah.
maybe it's more of a mindset thing, but I really wanted to keep the bar high and be
Yeah.
strict about it, because as I described the vicious circle before, this is exactly how you get there, right? You keep losing and losing the rules, and then you have no rules at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that now that makes a ton of sense to say, because then you, as you said, you have the high level view. You look at your list from the past year and you see red, 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 and then it turning green, right? And
Yeah,
mostly green and then all green. And so it's a snapshot rather of, were we done within the cycle? Not was the project done at all, but were we done within the cycle?
yeah, that's
And
true.
it frames it all around that. Cool.
Yeah, and my
Um,
guidance always on that was, hey, you didn't finish on time. That's like, yeah, let's acknowledge it. But do you know what you could have done? And I was guiding the team back to this. Like, I think this was maybe even the biggest change. Like, we used to do fixed scope, variable time. Like, it's done,
yeah.
it's done. And this turns the whole thing upside down. So I was telling them, you know how long you have. You have those 6 weeks. You can predict like what you need to do in which week, but you have variable scope. This is your knob that you can turn around. So do you know, like, I need to teach them that it is okay to cut some scope. Like, it's the must-haves, and it's the solution that we want to build. We still need to solve the problem we set to, but there's so many ways to do it, and the scale is really wide. So this is something the teams needed to understand and learn how to work with.
What does your setup look like now? Like, can you talk us through the main rituals, tactics,
Mm.
rules, and roles that you have now?
Yeah. So as we have pretty much pivoted, we were able to stabilize our teams. It was, for me, the indicator was that I no longer need to pick people across multiple teams to deliver a bet. So once this was settling down, we handed more power to the teams. So it is, I think it's still a shape up framework. We still use it for delivery, but most of the rituals shifted to the teams. So we have four teams, but they are like highly empowered. They decide what to shape. They have their own KPIs related to those scopes, right?
Yeah.
They write the pitches. They decide what to bet on. And me and other leaders, we just provide support, coaching, mentoring, and that's it, right? And to connect it to my personal North Star, I would love to work in a team like that.
Yeah. Totally. And so do you have a betting table as well on top? Like, is that something
No,
you
no, no,
use?
not in a way that there would be like ready to go pitches going on the betting table. It's more of the team telling us here are the topics we are interested in, uh, maybe provide us with some guidance, but we realized we don't have the capacity to actually fully develop all the pitches, all the alternatives, and we just focused on what will realistically fit in the cycle. So maybe two small ones, one big one, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that also I don't I'm not sure if it's mentioned in the book or how Basecamp does it, but not all of the team members are necessarily working on the bets. We did separate the planned work and the unplanned work. So there's typically
Mm-hmm.
well, one or two people dealing with bug reports, support questions, or any other ad hocs, right? To protect those who need the full focus.
Yeah, that's actually a tactic I've seen a lot of teams develop, that they have this on-call person that just rotates. And so you'd have across four teams, you'd have four people kind of on call at any given moment. Is that how it then plays out?
It it's actually the team's decision how to allocate the people. There are things like vacations and
Yeah.
maybe personal preferences, or like someone wants to take a break, work on some tech debt, maybe things like that, or someone has a personal development project, things like that. So we leave it on the teams, and they say, hey, we are going to do these two bets. It will use those X amount of people, and these two guys will sit on the bench for the cycle, work on other things, right? So we don't we don't need to use the full capacity of like everyone to be on the bet. Like you still
Yeah.
need some buffer. So that's the reason why we do this.
And the staffing, or that decision, is that I'd love to understand a bit the culture then you have inside of those teams. Is that the product manager driving this, or is it really a kind of democracy inside of them?
It's the team leader making the call, like, and that's a technical person. And
Uh-huh.
since there's always just one designer, it's more of a question like whether designer goes into delivery mode or discovery or doing some research. So that's
Mm-hmm.
easier. But for the engineers, it's about some agreement, right? So the team leader kind of gathers the preferences. They would know their strong and weak sides. Like it's the
Yeah.
or like an organizational thing, and it as a team leader, you would know your team, you know your
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Um, I'd love to talk a bit more about shaping, because that's something where I see teams struggle with finding the balance between being too prescriptive versus too open ended, and also involving other functions in what gets built. Yeah, maybe let's talk about that. Is that something that you actively push in how kind of the business side works into what gets developed, or is it really driven solely by the product squads? the teams?
It is mainly driven by the product teams, or those teams I mentioned. The leadership still provides some context and connect across the teams. So it is a mix of top down and bottom up, but mainly bottom up, I would say. Right. So the shaping, if I were to talk about challenges with shaping, I think it was mainly about finding the right amount of work. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
it was, I don't know, maybe even connected to the early days where there was like so much scope creep. Now, actually, I was able to anticipate, based on the author of the pitch, to know if it was just a huge one or the one where you would even deliver the nice to haves. So this is
Yeah.
something we had to balance, and it took us some time to calibrate, to actually balance the voice of the team and the voice of the author. So yeah, that's probably another case where it helped us to keep track of everything. And as I mentioned that I also write down the learnings, I would write, hey, this was a really huge one and we shouldn't do it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the technical voice at the beginning, or even until today, it is still me to some degree at like a higher level things. I usually operate on like the systems level, right? Like how are those big boxes connect to each other? How are the teams aligned and so on? And on the finer level, there are usually the team leads. As I said, those are technical people, or the whole team during the cooldown. So they have
Mm-hmm.
some time dedicated to provide feedback right before the next cycle kicks off, just and also to get familiar with what's getting built. And this is actually a nice illustration of like, if a bet is like super huge, it would take so much time of the whole team to make it smaller. So we would still do
Mm-hmm.
some scope hammering, and it would eventually become deliverable. But if it starts too big, it takes so much effort to make it reasonable. So it is much better, obviously, to start reasonable and avoid spending that time. But that was
Yeah.
something that we need to like realize and actually be mindful of.
Did you facilitate this sharing of insights in any ritual? Like, in Scrum, you would have a retro of retros across teams, or was it really more free flowing, ad hoc kind of sharing of learnings?
We actually experimented with different ways of working, ways of synchronizing during the cycle, and all the teams eventually settled on the same, that is being like daily text updates over Slack and a weekly retro slash progress update slash demo. So uh, that is the place where I would gather some of those insights, and especially in the final week, there's the retro is like more of a closure. Like, hey, it's done. This is what worked. This is what didn't. And we have this template of like maybe five questions, like how was the pitch? Was it well written? How well did we organize our time? Things like that. This is where I get the most valuable insights.
Cool. Yeah, the issue that I personally just have experienced with written daily updates is that you tend to get into a mode where you're saying, I'm working on X, and on the next day you say, I finished working on X, and now I'm working on Y, or I'm still working on X. Um, does that resonate, or are
Mm,
you just...
yeah. I think it does. It's we're not that strict about the dailies, so it's fine if you skip a bunch. But it is, at least in my view, it is a way how to signal that maybe you would need someone's attention or collaboration or something like, uh, hey, I just finished with this dialogue here, so I will need the design for the next one. Things like that. uh, if it's it really depends on the bet. In some cases, you need really tight collaboration. In others, you have backend guys doing backend, front end guys doing front end, and that's it. Like they connect in a week or two, and that's it. So it really depends. But that's where the weekly, like online meetings actually are useful, and that's where you get that's where you look at the slices, you tick off those that are done, you see, hey, how many are we having like are left before we need to finish, how many weeks we have, are we ready for usability testing, things like that.
Is that one big demo where all of the teams present, or is it per team? And how are you involved there?
It is per team. It is per team. I am an optional guest.
Mhm.
I don't always manage to visit all of them, but it is always recorded, and I do like to get to maybe every other and always the last week to get a sense of progress, to see if I have like regular meetings with some of the people, but not all of them. So it's more of a health check for me. And
Yeah.
since they also do demos, it's always nice to see progress, right? So I'm always happy when something is done, looks great. So that's just to
Yeah.
please myself.
Was was that a change in how you work that you had to make, or did you always have a kind of a demo culture?
We didn't actually. We did try to push it, but it probably didn't fit in the way of work. It was this like, hey, everyone's doing demos. We would like to see some progress, but there wasn't probably enough progress, right? So we needed
Hmm.
to get into this like shipping mode, like getting things done, and then it was able to do demos. It's a From my side, it was actually a good forcing function for the teams to do those like slices across all the functions, right?
Hmm.
So you need to be able to show something typically in week two. Like it can be an
Yeah.
ugly, unstyled page, but it should do something. You should be able to click a button. So that was my guidance, and then eventually the teams just took over, and they are like really proud of presenting demos to themselves and to others if someone else is joined.
Cool. Yeah, I was gonna say that the vertical slices could be a nice enabler for having early demos of actual stuff that's working, but it's only like one part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're coming up a bit on time, and I'd maybe just get your like a look back on what do you feel like any of the challenges that you encounter would have been preventable, or what are your biggest learnings in adopting ShapeUp? Your kind of what recommendations would you make for other teams in thinking
Mhm.
about ShapeUp?
I was thinking how ShapeUp fits, if it really needs a company to be of a certain to have some culture or some background, and I still
Yeah.
don't know. I only implemented it in one company so far, so that is to be seen. But I don't think I would do anything differently. Like there were bumps on the road, that's normal, but it did work out. And it turns out it is actually so powerful that I can see other parts of the company adopting the language of ShapeUp, not necessarily the practices and the processes, but uh, the terms like cycle, scope hammering, must-haves, rabbit holes. They are understood by other people and used, like maybe in business cases or something. So it is really interesting. Uh, a colleague of mine is actually thinking about using ShapeUp outside of development. So I'm curious to see how
Hmm.
that goes. I don't
What team
know.
would that be?
More like a product marketing and other functions. So I don't know. Maybe there will be a case study about that in some time or one day. But
Yeah.
the overall feelings are great. Like it was so much. It improved the position of development teams so much across the company when we started shipping regularly, like regularly and on schedule. It's it's incredible, right? Everyone knows, everyone in the company, like salespeople, everyone, they just know, hey, in a few weeks it will be end of cycle. We will get new stuff, and we can
Yeah.
tell our clients and prospects about it. So that is one. And with this confidence in being mostly green or all green, you get trust from other stakeholders, and it's just like things just start working. And for the teams themselves, from the people being participating on the delivery, having full focus, is really a superpower. That is something that is really hard to get back from, and I wouldn't. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. And I like to maybe sum things up. This raises the bar for me for any future role or company. I mean, this, like, leaving this behind me and getting back to Kanban or Scrum or whatever, that would be super hard. I don't know if I would do that.
Yeah, I can relate. um, yeah, that was actually, I mean, this is a bit off topic, but that was the origin story for, I created this Shape Up job board as a side project where the company I had been working at was getting liquidated, unfortunately, as part of the COVID pandemic. And we had adopted Shape Up, and I was feeling similar things like, oh man, I had so much time to really think about what's next, just coming from a product manager role, right? Where you have a 6-week cycle, you also have kind of 6 weeks to prepare the next thing. Whereas in a Scrum setting, it's, more like, oh shit, it's Thursday again, it's kickoff. What are we going to pull into the next sprint? And you think more about ticket level things. And that's, I was like, I gotta somehow identify companies that work with ShapeUp so I can find jobs there.
That is actually a good trick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dedicated job board for shape up companies. It's
So
great.
if you're hiring, this is my invitation to post your jobs there, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. I do you have any last things that you think would be relevant that maybe we haven't covered yet?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think like all the listeners are already curious at least about shape up or even putting it into practice. So I'm just happy that the word is spreading.
Definitely. And on that note, what would be like if somebody would be interested in engaging deeper with you and your experience? Is that something you would be open to? And if so, what would be a good way to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just hit me up at LinkedIn. That's the best way.
Cool. Yeah, I can attest to that, and I'm gonna
Sure.
I'm gonna leave your link in the show notes to your profile. Cool. Maybe to end on something completely unrelated, and this is again a personal experience, personal interest of mine. I'm being very selfish here, but do you have any resources in terms of books, videos, whatever that influence the way you think about product development, but that aren't from the necessarily on the topic of product development? I mean, to give you one of my examples is there's this book called A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. I have to look it up. Is that the title? Yeah, I think so. By George Saunders, which is about kind of a masterclass on 7 Russian short stories and how storytelling, how great storytelling works. And I found that to be really interesting to my work as a PM, like thinking about different aspects where you have to do storytelling. So, like, really left field stuff. I don't know if you have any of those, but if you don't, feel free to just drop your favorite recommendations in terms of books.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to disappoint you a bit. I'm not that much of a reader, and aside the classical things like no rules and those things, I the most inspiration I get is from the people around me. So they read the books, and then I get the distilled insights, maybe around product discovery, maybe around, I don't know, pricing and various product things. So that would be it. Just having great people around me.
Cool. I mean, they'll love to hear this.
Yeah, and
So shout out to your team.
yeah, but it is harder than buying a book.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was fully packed with really cool insights. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy hearing this and getting to learn from you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with David. I certainly did. If you like this show, please leave us a favorable review on your podcast platform of choice. And to find jobs at companies that work with ShapeUp, like ROI Hunter, remember to check out our job board at shapers.builders. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.